who can be called an aristocrat in the 21st century. Of course, there are still some formal dukes or princes, but their role is comparable to the decoration at Disneyland. So how did the most powerful class of the people come to be? And where did it disappear to? Let's start with the formation of the first states. With the invention of agriculture, people had no need to move somewhere and settled in an area with a good climate, favorable for a plant growth. This change in the way of life contributed to the accumulation of resources, and at some point in time, the stronger one imposed a social contract on the weaker one, and the stronger ones protect the weaker ones from the stronger ones from other cities. This stratum of the population became the first kings, who in turn took to their service people with a certain skill, for example, to fight well and be loyal, although they did not yet belong to the aristocracy that we used to call it. So, what is aristocracy? And here we must understand the difference between the elites and the aristocracy. First of all, an aristocrat is made an aristocrat by the origin of a noble family, which in the past achieved some success, which gives them the opportunity to earn and accumulate money, which they spend on the education of the descendants. The first full-fledged aristocrat can be considered Roman patricians, who were the descendants of the first 100 members of the first Roman Senate, chosen by the first king of Rome in 753 before Christ. All the criteria of aristocracy are met here: status by birth, accumulated ancestral wealth, and constitutionally enshrined law that separated the patricians from the plebeians. Only patrician in the Roman Republic could hold public office, and they also owned the best land in Rome, which allowed them to earn a good living. It is the Roman Republic system that can be considered a full-fledged aristocracy. Many people considered this system to be the best, but it seems to me that it's not so simple. Yeah, the great advantages of aristocracy is the fact that its representatives from childhood have the best possible education and are also descendants of the strongest representatives of the nation. But the biggest disadvantages of the aristocracy, in my opinion, it is prone to degeneration, which is proved by many cases from history. Every year, the representatives of the noble house become worse and worse, while conservative law do not allow the aristocracy to mix with successful representatives from other classes. For example, the aristocracy of ancient Rome itself was gradually weakening. In 494 BC, equality between plebeians and patricians before the law was enshrined. In 445 BC, the law allowed mixed marriages between plebeians and patricians. By 287 BC, the law passed by the plebeians' assembly became binding on the entire Roman people. Moreover, it prohibited the senatorial veto of law passed by the plebeian council, and also around 300 BC, the priesthood was also divided between patrician and plebeians. By the 1st century AD, with the formation of the Roman Empire, the Senate had become a mere formality, and the word patrician rather came to mean just a rich man in Rome. You can thank Caesar for this. And now we come to the apocalypse, namely the fall of the Roman Empire. There is a very interesting process. The Roman Empire was a very centralized state, but to the end of the Roman Empire, incredible change occurred. The number of peasants who paid rent to a landlord began to increase, leading to an increase in the influence of local landlord. Decline in demand for goods of artisan origin began the process of out-migration from the cities to small settlements, where artisans could farm. At first, local landlords considered themselves citizens of Rome, but after a while the largest landlords began to realize themselves as sole owners of the land. The smaller landlords began to swear allegiance to the largest one to protect their resources. We're moving to the next chapter, medieval aristocracy. The lords who gained power in the early Middle Age were mostly barbarians who had settled in the territories of the Roman Empire. In fact, they repeated the process that took place before the establishment of ancient Rome. The state became much more fragmented. Vassals formally received land from their formal ruler, the suzerain, in return for the obligation to give part of the land revenues and to send their army to help the suzerain. The suzerain himself was obliged to protect their vassals from other invaders. The aristocracy was not longer unified but given more local freedoms. It became more military, as each lord had to have a small army. There was no secular aristocracy in the Middle Age, as material status could not affect the status of person who did not have land. Even a townsman was a subject of feudal lord. It is also difficult to call the then lords aristocracy, as there were not full-fledged states in the early Middle Age. However, true aristocracy was established only in the modern time, closer to 1500. The gradual transition to a professional army and the advent of gunpowder increased the influence of the monarchy and made the state stronger. With the formation of strong states and the strengthening of borders allowed feudal lords not to worry about being killed by their neighborhood, as well as deepen in the development of their own domain. Later, more and more possessions passed under the direct control of the king. The representatives of the noble house themselves received for the deeds of their ancestors public offices and the opportunity to influence the monarch at court. Doesn't that remind you of anything? But there was also a significant difference. Now, as in ancient Rome, aristocrats held the best public offices, and their holdings allowed them to develop and engage in full-fledged politics. Their influence was now inflated largely by their ranks, which determined not the size of the land they ruled, but rather how close they were to the king. Also, the main income they received was not so much from the land as from their enterprises. I've already mentioned the essential difference from the Roman Empire. In the 21st century, the average person in Europe has access to far more resources than even medieval kings. Every year, people get richer. The same process occurred in Europe with the formation of full-fledged states. Merchants gained wealth comparable to that of aristocracy, as well as peasants who also managed to accumulate any capital. As a result, the influence of hereditary aristocrats weakened and the aristocracy itself began to erode. Also important is the process of formation of nations by 17th century, which had not existed until then. In 1789, there was the French Revolution, which marked the end of the monarchy in Europe. From that moment on, power was transferred to democratically elected politicians throughout Europe. The monarch was now just a formality, so now not only could the aristocracy hold the highest offices of states, they were deprived of their fixed privileges. They had to compete with the rest of the population, and their outdated principle didn't give them the opportunity to adapt quickly. And that's the answer to the question of where the aristocracy disappeared to. But can things change again? Can society be divided into states again? And I don't have any answer to this question.